In addition to the manual scene generation process, there's also an automatic scene generation process available to you when you purchase the kit. And this is very useful because a lot of times you're going to be making changes to your terrain or your meshes, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to manually reproduce those scenes every time you make changes. So if you go into Assets, Dynamic Loading Kit, and Generate Scenes, you can find the scene generation tool. Now you will need prefabs in order to use this scene generation tool. That is prefabs of your terrain or meshes, whatever you're using as your base objects for your world. In this case, I already have some terrains created, which you can see by... So I already have this little test world created for us. Doesn't look very pretty, but it will get the job done. Now if you used this tool before, you'll notice that it's a little bit different. With 4.2 I made some changes. First things first, we've split up the input and the output into two separate fields. So you can see here I have my input group name. This refers to the group name of the terrain that you're using to generate the scene. And your output group name is the base name, or the group name of the scenes. So of course you can use the same name for both of them, but if you want to, you can also change the name. Of course your input group name is going to have to match your prefabs, but your output can be whatever you want. You also see this input naming convention and output naming convention field. The naming convention asset was added with 4.2 and basically allows you to switch up the naming convention from the default. I include a naming convention that's compatible with the terrains created with Terrain Composer by default with the kit. And I've actually just created a duplicate of that file, and you can see it here. So in the format field, this is actually what's specifying the format that you're going to be following. So by default, the format is %G, which refers to the group name, underscore, %Y, which is the row number, underscore, %X, which is the column number. So this was the default naming convention used prior to 4.2. And everywhere that you see this naming convention field, if you leave it blank, it's going to automatically use this format right here, as well as with the numbering starts at 0 unchecked. So when this is unchecked, basically it's just saying that the numbering starts at 1 and not 0. So here, if I were to leave this field blank, it would automatically assume that the prefabs were in the default naming convention format. However, if we look at our prefabs, we can see that first of all, the numbering starts at 0, not 1. So we need to check that option. And we can see that our columns are actually before our rows, and they're preceded by an X, and our rows are preceded by this Y. This is the default naming convention of Terrain Composer, as I said before. And we can simply go back and change this. So we have an X followed by our column number, which is represented again by %X, underscore, and then a letter Y, and then our row number. So here you see each one has a letter X in front of it, followed by the column number, underscore, letter Y, followed by the row number. We're going to drag that into our input naming convention. Our output naming convention, that could be whatever you want. In this case, I'm just going to leave it the same as our input. Group is 3D, so if we leave this option unchecked, it's basically just telling us that the group we're generating scenes for is only using the X and Z plane, or possibly the X and Y plane. In this case, because we're using terrains, those are on the X and Z plane only. So we're going to leave that option unchecked. Another change with 4.2 was the addition of these range fields. Previously, you just had to enter the number of rows and number of columns in your group, and every time you generated the scenes, it would generate a scene for each and every one of those prefabs in your group. Now we can actually select either one terrain, two terrains, or multiple terrains by inputting a range. So I need to change this obviously because it has my first row and first column starting at 1. However, my input fields are starting at 0, so oops. And my last row and my last column are 3. Now I could change my first run to 3, my first row and my first column both to 3, and that would just generate a scene for this terrain X3, Y3. In this case though, I want to create scenes for every single prefab in this group. You also need to specify the unbound object tag. I went over this in a previous video, so you should understand it. I've already created a tag called unbound, so I'm going to set it. Next is the very important RScenesFixed option. Again, I've went over this in the previous video, so you should know what it means. Of course, you can hover over each of these labels to kind of find out more about them. Not every field has these tooltips, but some of them do. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and click RScenesFixed as true. My Save Scenes at File path, this is the folder where the scenes are going to be saved. And I've already got the correct folder in my case selected there. And I want to use the prefabs at this folder. This is a resources folder, but these prefabs do not need to be stored in a resources folder. You can store them wherever you want in your project. You can also click these buttons to set these paths as the default save scene path, or scene save path, and prefab load path. So every time you use the tool, it's going to come up with this folder or this folder. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and generate my scene. Oh, actually, you know what? I need to drag these naming conventions over. And this will just take a moment to generate the scenes. And we've got an error there, so well, that's actually a bug. Somehow it was interpreting, oh wait, no, it sorry, those errors were actually from earlier. They weren't from the generation process, so we don't need to worry about those. Basically, it was just saying that the naming convention that was provided did not see. When I hit this group is 3D option on accident, these naming conventions don't have a %Z, which is the layer number, so it went ahead and removed them. That's why I actually had to go back in and drag these back in. Anyways, you can see our scenes were generated here if we click on them. Got our terrain at column 0, row 0, and you can see this terrain was basically just put in the scene as is. Its tag was changed to unbound, but that was the only change made to it. If we go into our build settings, we can also see that we have all of our scenes automatically added to them. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back into my Generate Scenes tool and uncheck RScenesFixed, regenerate my scenes. I'm doing this for a couple different reasons. First of all, I want to show that our scenes are automatically replaced in the folder. And in our build settings, they're automatically replaced in there as well. prior to 4.2, you'd actually have to go in and manually delete the previously generated scenes in here. Now they're automatically replaced as long as the folder path matches exactly. Now if we go into our scenes here, because that rscenes fix option was unchecked, we actually have two objects now. We have a new dummy empty object that's serving as the root object. Its tag was changed to unbound. And then our actual terrain is parented to this root object and then hidden by disabling the game object. So those are basically the differences between having that rscenes fix option checked or unchecked.